The rain came down hard that afternoon, fat, heavy drops that turned the dusty lanes of the Dharavi settlement into rivers of mud. It wasn't the gentle kind of rain that cools the air and brings relief. No, this was the kind that soaked you to the bone in seconds, the kind that made your clothes cling like wet rags and your shoes squelch with every step. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and grumbling, like the city itself was tired of holding everything together. 12-year-old Mira trudged through the narrow alleyways, her thin cotton school uniform plastered to her skin. Her school bag, patched in 3 places with mismatched thread, was slung over one shoulder, and in her hand she clutched a small plastic sack half filled with empty bottles and crumpled aluminum cans. She'd spent the last 2 hours after school combing through trash bins near the railway tracks, hoping to find enough recyclables to trade for a few rupees at the scrap dealer's stall. Every coin counted. Her mother had been coughing more these past weeks, and the local clinic kept saying she needed proper medicine that cost more than their weekly rice ration. Mira wasn't supposed to be out this late. But when your family eats only if you bring something home, rules like be back before dark become suggestions, not commands. She knew the risks, the stray dogs that roamed after sunset, the men who lingered near the liquor shop with too much time and too little kindness, but hunger was a sharper fear than shadows. She turned a corner, boots sinking into the slick mud, and that's when she saw him. At first, she thought it was a stray dog curled up under the broken concrete ledge of an old railway underpass, but as she got closer, the shape straightened slightly. A small boy, maybe 10 or 11, sitting with his knees pulled to his chest, arms wrapped tightly around himself. He wore clothes that looked wildly out of place here: crisp navy trousers, a white shirt now dark with rain, and expensive-looking shoes caked in mud. His hair was neatly cut, his skin clean, unlike the children of Dharavi, whose faces were often smudged with dust or soot from cooking fires. He looked lost. Not just geographically lost, but deeply, utterly lost, like someone who'd woken up in a world that made no sense anymore. Mira stopped a few feet away, unsure. She'd learned early not to trust strangers, especially well-dressed ones. They usually came with cameras asking for stories or photos for awareness, then left without ever coming back. But this boy wasn't holding a camera. He wasn't even looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the puddle forming at his feet, and his lower lip trembled slightly, though he wasn't crying. Not yet. She hesitated. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since morning. All she had left was the small packet of poha her neighbor had given her at lunch: flattened rice mixed with a pinch of turmeric, lemon, and raw onions, wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. It wasn't much, but it was food. And right now it was all she had. Still, something in the boy's posture, the way his shoulders hunched like he was trying to disappear, made her take a step forward. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft, almost drowned out by the rain. The boy flinched, startled. He looked up, eyes wide and red-rimmed. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, I can't find my teacher." Mira crouched down, keeping a respectful distance. "Where were you supposed to be?" "On a school trip," he said, voice cracking. "We were at the Science Museum. I went to the bathroom, and when I came out, everyone was gone." He swallowed hard. "I tried to call my phone, but it got wet. And then I got turned around. I've been walking for hours." His words tumbled out fast, like he'd been holding them in, afraid to say them out loud. Mira believed him. There was no reason for a rich kid to lie about being lost in a slum like this. If anything, he looked terrified to be here. She glanced at the sky. The rain wasn't letting up. Night would fall soon, and the streets would get even more dangerous. She couldn't leave him here. "Do you know your school's name?" she asked. He nodded quickly. "St. Xavier's in Bandra." Bandra. That was across the city, nearly an hour by train if you had money for the fare. Mira didn't. But she knew the police station near the railway crossing. They sometimes helped lost kids. Once they'd even reunited a little girl from her lane with her aunt in Thane. It wasn't perfect. Police could be rough. Impatient, but it was better than nothing. "Come on," she said, standing up and offering her hand. "I'll take you to the police." The boy hesitated, eyeing her muddy hand. But then, as if deciding she was the least scary option in a sea of uncertainty, he took it. His palm was soft, unused to labor. Mira's was rough, calloused from hauling water and sorting trash. They walked in silence for a while, the rain drumming on rooftops and tin sheets. Mira led him through winding alleys, past open drains and clotheslines strung between shanties, past women stirring pots over kerosene stoves and old men playing cards under leaking tarps. The boy kept his eyes down, overwhelmed by the noise, the smells, the sheer closeness of life here. After 10 minutes, Mira stopped. She reached into her school bag and pulled out the small newspaper packet. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing the slightly soggy but still edible poha inside. "Here," she said, holding it out. "You must be hungry." The boy stared at it, then at her. "But what about you?" "I ate already," she lied. Her stomach twisted in protest, but she ignored it. "Go on. You need energy." He took the food slowly, as if afraid it might vanish. Then, with the manners of someone raised to say thank you even in chaos, he whispered, "Thank you." He ate quickly but neatly, using his fingers the way everyone did, though Mira noticed he didn't touch the onions, probably not used to street food spices. When he finished, he folded the newspaper carefully and handed it back. "You didn't have to do that," he said, voice steadier now. Mira shrugged. It's just food. But it wasn't just food. To her, it was a meal she wouldn't get back. It was calories she needed to walk another mile, to carry another load, to stay awake while her mother coughed through the night. Yet she didn't regret giving it away. There was something in the boy's eyes. Relief, gratitude, a flicker of hope that made the hunger feel lighter. They reached the small police outpost near the railway crossing. A single bulb flickered above the door, casting long shadows. 2 officers sat inside, sipping tea and flipping through a newspaper. One looked up as they entered, eyebrows raised at the sight of a slum girl leading a drenched, well-dressed boy. "What's this?" the officer asked, setting down his cup. Mira explained quickly. "Found him lost near the underpass, says he's from St. Xavier's, got separated from his school trip." The officer grunted, then turned to the boy. "Name?" "Arjun," the boy said. "Arjun Mehta." The officer's eyes widened slightly. He'd probably seen the news, everyone had. The missing heir. The billionaire's son. The city had been buzzing about it for hours. But he didn't say anything. Just nodded and picked up the phone. While the officer made calls, Mira stood near the door, water dripping from her sleeves. Arjun looked at her, then at the officer, then back at her. "Will you stay?" he asked quietly. Mira shook her head. "I have to get home. My brother. He gets scared when it storms." Arjun nodded, understanding. Can I know your name?" She paused. Part of her wanted to say it. But another part, the part that had learned caution young, held back. Names could be used. Promises could be broken. She'd seen too many good Samaritans disappear after the cameras left. "It doesn't matter," she said gently. "You're safe now. That's what counts." Before he could reply, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside, tires splashing through puddles. Men in dark suits jumped out, scanning the area like soldiers. One rushed into the station, eyes locking onto Arjun. Relief flooded his face. "Master Arjun." "Thank God." Arjun stood up, but he didn't move toward the man right away. He turned back to Mira, searching for words. But she was already stepping out into the rain. "Wait," he called. She turned, rain streaming down her face. "Thank you," he said, voice thick. "Really?" Mira gave a small nod. Then she turned and walked away, her boots squelching in the mud, her stomach empty but her heart strangely full. Behind her, the SUV doors closed. Engines roared. The city swallowed the sound. She didn't look back. By the time she reached her home, a single room with a tin roof and walls made of salvaged wood, her mother was awake, sitting by the kerosene lamp, coughing into a cloth. "Where were you, Beta?" her mother asked, voice raspy. "Out," Mira said, wringing water from her school uniform. "Found some bottles. Got a little money." She didn't mention the boy. Didn't mention the poha. Some things felt too fragile to speak aloud, like if you said them, they'd lose their magic. Her younger brother, barely 6, ran to her, eyes wide. "Did you see the lightning?" "Yes," she said, ruffling his hair. "And I wasn't scared." She sat on the thin mat they used as a bed, shivering slightly. Her mother handed her a cup of weak tea, more water than milk, but warm. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Somewhere across the city, a family was reuniting, tears mixing with relief. Somewhere, news channels were updating their headlines. But here, in this quiet room lit by a single flame, none of that mattered. Mira sipped her tea, wrapped a thin shawl around her shoulders, and listened to her brother's steady breathing as he fell asleep. She hadn't changed the world today. She hadn't even changed her own life, but she'd helped someone find their way home. And sometimes that was enough. The city woke up the next morning with a different kind of tension in the air, not the usual chaos of traffic horns and street vendors shouting, but a hushed, nervous energy that clung to every conversation. News vans lined the roads near the Science Museum. Police officers stood at every major intersection, checking IDs, stopping school buses, scanning crowds with sharp eyes. Posters with a boy's face, clean-cut, serious eyes, wearing a navy blazer, were taped to lampposts, shop windows, even the sides of auto rickshaws. Missing, they read in bold red letters. Reward, R50 lakh. No one in Dharavi had seen the posters. Most didn't own TVs, and the few who did were too busy mending clothes or boiling lentils to watch the morning news. But Mira felt the shift anyway. The scrap dealer paid her faster than usual, his eyes darting toward the street. The chaiwala spoke in low tones to his regulars, shaking his head. Even the stray dog seemed quieter, as if the whole city was holding its breath. Mira didn't connect it to the boy from yesterday. To her, he was just a lost child she'd helped, another face in a lifetime of small kindnesses that never made headlines. She went about her day like any other, woke before sunrise, boiled water for tea, helped her brother tie his shoes, walked him to the tiny community school 2 lanes over. Then she came home, changed into her own uniform, faded blue with a frayed collar, and headed to her school on the edge of the settlement, where the walls were cracked but the teachers still showed up. It wasn't until lunchtime that she heard. She sat under the banyan tree in the schoolyard, sharing a single roti with her best friend, Priya. They'd split it down the middle, no words needed. That's how it was when you grew up knowing hunger. You didn't count bites. You just made sure the other person got enough. A group of older boys huddled near the gate, whispering excitedly. One held up a crumpled newspaper. "Did you hear?" Priya said, lowering her voice. "Some rich kid went missing yesterday. Billionaire's son. They say he vanished from a school trip." Mira froze, roti halfway to her mouth. "They found him last night," Priya went on, eyes wide. "In Dharavi. Can you believe it? A kid like that lost in our lanes?" Mira's heart thudded. "Where? Where did they find him?" "Near the railway underpass, I think. Some girl helped him. Gave him food, took him to the police. But no one knows who she is. She didn't give her name." Mira looked down at her hands. Dirt under the nails, a fresh scrape on her knuckle from sorting glass bottles. She said nothing. Priya nudged her. "Imagine if it was you. You'd be famous. They'd give you money, maybe even a house." Mira forced a small smile. "Yeah, imagine." But inside, a quiet dread curled in her stomach. She didn't want fame. She didn't want money from strangers. She'd seen what happened when poor people got tangled up with the rich. Promises made, photos taken, then silence. A family in the next block once let a TV crew film their home for a human interest story. They were promised help. Nothing ever came. The camera lights left, and so did hope. She finished her lunch in silence, the taste of roti suddenly dry in her mouth. Meanwhile, across the city, in a high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Arabian Sea, a man sat alone in a dimly lit study. His suit was wrinkled. His tie hung loose. Empty coffee cups littered the desk. On the wall behind him, a digital screen displayed live feeds from security cameras, train stations, police outposts, highway checkpoints. Vikram Mehta hadn't slept in 36 hours. His son was safe. That was all that mattered. But the image of Arjun, drenched, trembling, eyes hollow with fear, kept replaying in his mind like a nightmare he couldn't wake from. He'd held his boy so tightly when they brought him home, whispering over and over, "You're okay. You're okay," as if saying it enough times would erase the hours of terror. But what haunted him more than the fear was the story Arjun kept telling. "There was a girl," he'd said, voice small but firm. "She gave me her food. She didn't even know who I was. And she walked me to the police. Then she just left." Vikram had asked for details, what she looked like, what she wore, anything. Arjun described her school uniform, her muddy boots, the way she held her shoulders like she carried the world. But no name, no address, just kindness given freely with no expectation of return. That kind of selflessness was rare in Vikram's world. In his world, everything had a price. Favors were investments. Kindness was strategy. But this girl, she'd given without knowing what she was giving to. That unsettled him. It also moved him in a way he couldn't explain. He called his head of security. Not the corporate kind, but the man who'd protected his family for 20 years, who knew how to move quietly through the city's underbelly. Find her, Vikram said, voice rough with exhaustion. Not for the media. Not for show. Just find her. I need to thank her. The man nodded. It won't be easy. Dharavi has 500,000 people. Then start with the police station near the railway underpass. Someone there saw her. While Vikram waited, the city buzzed with speculation. News anchors debated whether the girl was a hero or just lucky. Social media exploded with theories. Some said she was an angel. Others claimed it was a publicity stunt. A few even suggested the whole thing was staged. But Arjun, safe in his room with a warm blanket and a cup of hot chocolate, kept drawing pictures of her in his notebook. A girl with tired eyes, holding out a small packet of food. Back in Dharavi, Mira tried to forget. She told no one, not her mother, not Priya, not even her little brother. She washed her uniform, patched the tear in her school bag, and went to bed early, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the boy's face, the relief when she offered him food, the way he'd looked back at her before the black car took him away. The next morning, something strange happened. As she walked past the local clinic, the nurse called out to her, "Mira, wait!" Mira stopped, wary. The clinic never called out to her unless it was bad news. Another bill, another warning about her mother's worsening cough. But the nurse smiled. "Your mother's medicine, it's been paid for, all of it. For the next 3 months," Mira blinked. "What, by who?" The nurse shrugged. "Anonymous donor. Came in last night, paid in cash, didn't leave a name." Mira's stomach twisted. Coincidence? Maybe, but it felt too close, too sudden. That afternoon, the landlord, who usually banged on their door every Sunday demanding rent, walked by without a word. When Mira's mother asked him about it, he just waved a hand. "Rent's been settled. Don't worry about it." Now Mira was truly uneasy. She watched the streets more carefully, noticed the unfamiliar faces, men in plain clothes, not police, not locals, just watching. Not in a threatening way, but like they were searching for something. She started taking different routes to school, avoided the railway underpass, didn't speak to strangers. She even skipped scavenging for 2 days, staying close to home, helping her mother fold laundry for neighbors. But the world wouldn't let her disappear. One evening, as she carried water jugs from the communal tap, an old man from the next lane stopped her. He'd been a railway worker before he retired, knew everyone, remembered everything. "Child," he said gently, "a man came asking about you." Mira's breath caught. "About me?" He described a girl who helped a lost boy near the underpass. Said he just wanted to say thank you. "Did you tell him anything?" she asked, voice tight. The old man shook his head. "I said I didn't know who he meant." But he paused, studying her face. "Your eyes gave you away." Mira looked down at the ground. "Please don't tell anyone." "I won't," he said. "But kindness leaves footprints, Beta, even when you try to hide them." That night she lay awake again, listening to the rain begin once more. Her mind raced. What did they want from her? Money? A photo? A story to sell? She'd seen how the rich treated the poor, like characters in a drama they could watch from a distance, then switch off when it got too real. But then she remembered the boy's eyes. Not the billionaire's son, the lost child. Scared. Alone. Human. Maybe not everyone was like the TV crews. Still, she made a decision. If they came looking, she wouldn't run. But she wouldn't give them what they expected either. No tears, no begging. Just the truth. She'd helped because it was right, not because she wanted anything back. Days passed. The posters came down. The news vans left. The city moved on to the next crisis, the next scandal. Life in Dharavi returned to its usual rhythm. Hard, messy, but alive. Mira went back to scavenging. Her mother's cough eased with the new medicine. Her brother started sleeping through the night. And though she kept glancing over her shoulder, no one approached her, but someone was still watching. From a parked car 2 streets away, the security man observed her routine, how she walked with purpose, how she shared her lunch with a stray dog, how she always checked on the elderly woman who lived alone in the blue shack. He took notes not of her poverty but of her character. He reported back to Vikram that evening. "She's real," he said simply. "Not looking for anything, just living." Vikram sat silently for a long time. Then he said, "Keep watching. But don't interfere. Not yet." He wasn't ready to step into her world. Not as a billionaire. Not as a savior. He wanted to understand first why someone with so little would give so freely. And so, while Mira thought the story was over, it was only just beginning, unseen, unnoticed. A quiet chain of care had already been set in motion. Medicine paid, rent cleared, a schola. Barship form quietly filed with the education board under a generic name. No fanfare, no cameras. Just actions like stones dropped in water, sending ripples outward. Mira wouldn't know about any of it for months. But that night, as she lay on her thin mat, listening to the soft breathing of her family, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not because her life had changed, but because she'd done the right thing, and the world, for once, hadn't punished her for it. Weeks passed, and the city forgot. The missing boy became yesterday's news, replaced by political scandals, cricket scores, and the rising price of onions. In Dharavi, life moved on as it always did, hard, noisy, and stubbornly hopeful. Mira returned to her rhythm. School in the morning, scavenging in the afternoon, homework by kerosene lamp at night. Her mother's cough had eased, thanks to the mysterious medicine that kept appearing at the clinic, always paid for, never explained. Mira didn't question it too much. In a place where miracles were rare, you didn't poke at them, you just let them be. She'd almost convinced herself the whole thing had been a dream. The lost boy, the rain, the black car vanishing into the night, until the day the man in the plain shirt appeared. He wasn't like the others. No expensive watch, no stiff suit, no air of authority. He wore simple cotton pants and a faded kurta, the kind many older men in the city wore. He sat on a low wall near the water tap, sipping chai from a clay cup, watching children play marbles in the mud. He didn't look at Mira directly, but she felt his eyes. She'd seen him before, once near the railway crossing, once outside the clinic. Always distant, ever approaching, just present. That day, she decided to test him. She walked past slowly, jugs of water sloshing in her hands, and dropped one on purpose. It cracked against the ground, water spreading into the dust. She gasped, pretending to be flustered. The man didn't move right away, but after a few seconds he stood, walked over without a word, and picked up the jug. He examined the crack, then looked at her. "Still usable," he said in a calm, weathered voice. "Just don't carry it full." He handed it back. His hands were rough, like someone who'd worked with tools, not keyboards. There was no pity in his eyes, just quiet understanding. "Thank you," Mira said. He nodded, then went back to his wall, sipping his chai like nothing had happened. But Mira knew. He wasn't just passing by. He was watching her. Not to take something, but to see. She didn't tell anyone. Not yet, but she started noticing more small things. The landlord stopped mentioning rent altogether. The local grocer began slipping an extra onion or potato into her mother's bag when she paid. Once she found a new pair of school shoes, her size, left outside their door with no note. She almost threw them away, afraid they were a trap. But her brother's eyes lit up so brightly when he saw them that she kept them. Still, no one came forward. No cameras, no interviews, just kindness appearing like morning dew, quiet, unexpected, gone before you could question it. Across the city, in a quiet office far from boardrooms and press conferences, Vikram Mehta sat with a stack of reports. Not financial statements, not market analyses. These were different. Notes from his longtime security aide. Observations, not investigations. She walks 3 kilometers every day to school. One note read. Shares her lunch with a neighbor's child who has no mother. Helps an old woman carry firewood twice a week. Never asks for anything. Another. Her mother works as a seamstress. They earn less than 500 rupees a week. Yet last month, Mira gave her last 10 rupees to a blind beggar near the temple. Vikram read them over and over, as if trying to memorize the shape of a soul he'd never met. He'd spent his life building empires, factories, tech startups, luxury hotels. He measured success in profits, in headlines, in influence. But this girl, She measured it in shared meals and mended clothes and showing up when no one was watching. It unsettled him. Not because it was strange, but because it reminded him of something he'd lost long ago. Before money, before power, before the world taught him that everything had a price. He remembered his own father, a schoolteacher with calloused hands and a gentle voice, who once gave his only umbrella to a student caught in the rain. "What did you do that for?" young Vikram had asked. "Now you'll get sick," his father had smiled. Maybe, but he needed it more. Vikram hadn't understood then. Now reading about Mira, he finally did. One evening, he made a decision. He wouldn't send a car. He wouldn't offer a check. He wouldn't make a grand gesture that would drown her in attention she didn't want. Instead, he'd do what she had done for his son. Help quietly, without expecting anything in return. He called a trusted contact at the education department, a woman who owed him a favor, but who also cared about real change. "I want to create a scholarship," he said. "Full tuition, books, uniform, transport. For a girl in Dharavi, but no name attached, no press, just make it happen," the woman agreed. "But how will she know it's for her?" "She won't," Vikram said. "Not at first. Let the school decide who deserves it. Let it feel like luck, not charity." Meanwhile, Mira's school principal received an unexpected letter. A private donor had funded a full scholarship for one student from their school, someone with strong grades, good character, and financial need. The selection process would be confidential. The principal thought immediately of Mira, not just because she was smart, she ranked third in her class, but because of how she carried herself. She never complained, never compared, just worked quietly, with a kind of dignity that didn't need applause. But the principal didn't tell Mira right away. She wanted to be sure the offer was real. She called the number on the letter, spoke to the education officer, verified everything. Only then did she call Mira into her office one afternoon after class. Mira walked in, heart pounding. Had she done something wrong? Forgotten an assignment? Broken a rule? The principal smiled. "Sit down, child." Mira perched on the edge of the chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. "There's been a development," the principal said carefully. "A scholarship has become available. Full coverage. For a good school in the city, one with science labs, a library, proper teachers. They're accepting one student from our area." Mira's breath caught. "But why me?" "Because you deserve it," the principal said simply. "Your marks are excellent. Your teachers speak highly of you, and," she paused, "you have a good heart. That matters more than grades sometimes." Mira didn't know what to say. A better school meant a better future. Maybe even college, maybe even a job that didn't involve sorting trash or stitching clothes until her fingers bled. But it also meant leaving Dharavi. Leaving her mother. Leaving everything familiar. What? What would my mother say? She whispered. "We'll speak to her together," the principal said gently. "But this is your chance, Mira. Don't let fear steal it from you." That night, Mira told her mother. They sat on their thin mat, the kerosene lamp flickering between them. Her mother listened quietly, eyes glistening. "You've always been smarter than this place," she said finally, voice thick. "I stayed because I had to, but you can go further." "But who will take care of you?" Mira asked, tears welling. "I'll manage," her mother said, squeezing her hand. "And your brother will help. Besides," she smiled faintly, "maybe this is the universe thanking you for that rainy day." Mira didn't understand what she meant, but she didn't ask. The next week, paperwork arrived, forms to fill, documents to sign, a letter of acceptance from the new school. Everything was in order. No donor name, no conditions. Just an open door. Mira accepted, but she still didn't know who had opened it. Not long after, Vikram made his move. He didn't go to Dharavi in a luxury car. He took a local train, wore simple clothes, and walked the last kilometer on foot. He wanted to see her world as it was, not through a windshield, but through his own eyes. He stood at the edge of the settlement as dusk fell, watching life unfold. Women cooking over open fires, children chasing a deflated football, the smell of spices and wet earth mixing in the air. It wasn't pretty in the way postcards were pretty, but it was alive, real, human. And then he saw her. Mira was helping her brother with math homework under a streetlight that flickered on and off. She pointed at numbers with a stick, patient, calm, When her brother got frustrated, she didn't scold him. She just smiled and said, "Try again. You're almost there." Vikram watched for nearly 20 minutes. He didn't approach, didn't speak, just stood in the shadows. A man used to commanding boardrooms, now humbled by a girl teaching addition under a broken streetlight. He saw the way she tucked her brother's shirt in before sending him inside, saw how she checked the latch on their door twice, saw how she stood for a moment afterward looking up at the sky as if gathering strength for tomorrow. In that moment he understood. This wasn't about repaying a debt. It was about honoring a truth, that goodness exists even where the world looks away. He turned and walked back to the station, his heart heavier and lighter at the same time. The next day, he authorized one final act, quiet, invisible, complete. He paid off the family's remaining debts, medical, rent, even the small loan they'd taken for her brother's school shoes, not through a bank transfer that left a trail, but through a local community fund that helped families in crisis. No name attached, just relief delivered like a secret. Back in Dharavi, Meera noticed the change. Slowly, the clinic stopped mentioning bills. The landlord stopped lingering near their door. Even the grocer stopped slipping extra vegetables because now, for the first time in years, her mother could afford to buy what they needed. Meera didn't connect the dots. She thought it was luck, or maybe the universe balancing things out. She didn't know that a man she'd never met was watching from afar, not as a savior but as a student, learning from her how to be human again. And she didn't know that soon. Their paths would cross once more, not in rain and fear, but in sunlight and possibility. For now, she packed her few belongings, mended her best uniform one last time, and prepared to step into a new world. Not because she was chosen, but because she'd already proven in the quietest way possible that she was ready. The first day at the new school felt like stepping onto another planet. Meera stood at the iron gates, clutching the strap of her second-hand school bag, heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. The building loomed ahead. White walls, tall windows, a manicured lawn that looked like it had never known a single footprint. Children in crisp uniforms streamed past her, laughing, chatting, some even holding tablets or fancy water bottles with cartoon characters. No one wore patched shoes. No one smelled of kerosene or wet laundry. She almost turned around. But then she remembered her mother's words. "You've always been smarter than this place." And her brother's wide eyes when she'd told him she was leaving. "Will you come back?" She'd promised she would. Every weekend. Without fail. So she took a deep breath and walked in. The headmistress greeted her warmly, showed her to her classroom, introduced her to the teacher. Everyone was polite, but their eyes lingered a second too long. Curious, maybe even a little wary. Meera knew why. She didn't belong here. Not really. Her uniform was clean, yes, but it hung slightly wrong, stitched by her mother's tired hands, not bought from a branded store. Her hair was neatly braided, but without the shiny clips the other girls wore. She kept her eyes down, shoulders tight, trying to make herself small. She found a seat in the back near the window. The desk was smooth, uncarved by generations of bored students. The chalkboard gleamed. Even the air smelled different, like lemon cleaner and new books, not dust and cooking oil. Then, halfway through the morning, the classroom door opened again. A boy walked in, late. Meera didn't look up at first. But something in the way he moved, the slight hesitation, the way his shoes tapped softly on the floor, made her glance sideways. And there he was. The boy from the rain. Older now, taller, his face less round. But those eyes, wide, serious, familiar, were the same. He scanned the room, looking for a seat, and then his gaze landed on her. For a second, nothing happened. Then his eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly. He froze. Meera's stomach dropped. She looked away quickly, pretending to study her notebook, her cheeks burning. No, not here. Not now. But it was too late. He walked straight to her desk. "You," he said, voice hushed but full of wonder. "You're the Poha girl." A few students turned, curious. Meera kept her eyes on the page, but her hands trembled. I don't know what you mean," she mumbled. "Yes, you do." He crouched slightly so he could see her face. "That rainy day, near the railway underpass. You gave me your food. You took me to the police. You didn't tell me your name." His voice softened. I looked for you. For weeks. Mira finally looked up. His expression wasn't mocking. It wasn't pitying. It was pure unguarded recognition, like he'd found something he'd been missing. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, he said. The teacher cleared her throat. Arjun, please take your seat. He didn't move. What's your name? Mira, she whispered. Mira, he repeated as if memorizing it. Then with a grin that lit up his whole face, he said, You're in my class now. He walked to his seat, 2 rows ahead, but kept glancing back at her all morning. At lunch, Mira sat alone under a tree in the courtyard, eating the simple meal her mother had packed: rice, lentils, a boiled egg. She watched the other students buy snacks from the canteen: samosas, fruit cups, packaged juice. She didn't feel jealous, just separate. Then a shadow fell over her. She looked up. Arjun stood there holding a tray with a sandwich, an apple, and a carton of milk. Can I sit? He asked. She nodded, unsure. He sat cross-legged on the grass, not caring that his trousers would get dirty. I told my father it was you, he said without preamble. He's been trying to find you for months. Mira stiffened. Why? Because he wanted to thank you, properly. I don't need thanks, she said quickly. I just helped someone who was lost. That's all. Arjun studied her. Most people would have asked for something. Money. A reward. But you didn't even give your name. I didn't help you for a reward, she said, voice firm now. I helped because you looked scared. He nodded slowly. That's what my father said. He said you were different. Mira didn't know what to say to that. Then Arjun leaned forward. The scholarship? It was him. He made it happen, her breath caught. Your father? He didn't want you to know. He thought you wouldn't accept it if you knew it came from us, so he made it anonymous. Mira stared at her hands. All this time, the shoes, the medicine, the rent, the school, it wasn't luck. It was him, the billionaire. The man whose son she'd helped in the rain. She felt a strange mix of gratitude and unease. She hadn't wanted charity. She'd just wanted to do the right thing. He's not like you think, Arjun said gently as if reading her mind. He's not flashy. He doesn't do this for show. He really wanted to help, but he didn't know how. Without making you uncomfortable. Mira looked up. Why does he care so much? Arjun was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Because you gave me food when you had almost nothing. And you didn't even know who I was. That kind of kindness. It changes people. Later that week, the school announced a community leaders visit day. Local business owners and philanthropists would tour the campus, meet students, talk about giving back. Most kids groaned. They hated these events, all stiff handshakes and boring speeches, but Mira felt a knot form in her stomach. She knew who would be coming. The day arrived. Students lined up in the main hall, dressed in their best uniforms. Mira stood near the back trying to disappear. Then the guests entered. Among them was a man in a simple navy suit, no tie, no flashy watch. His hair was streaked with gray, his face lined with the kind of tiredness that comes from carrying heavy things for a long time. He didn't look like the billionaires on TV. No smug smile, no camera-ready pose. He looked ordinary, human. Their eyes met across the room. He didn't smile, didn't wave, but he gave a small, respectful nod, like one person acknowledging another, not a rich man looking down at a poor girl. After the formal talk, the visitors mingled with students. Most headed toward the top performers, the debate champions, the science fair winners. But the man in the navy suit walked straight to Mira. She froze. May I speak with you? He asked, voice low and calm. She nodded, unable to speak. He led her to a quiet corner near the library, away from the crowd. I'm Arjun's father, he said. I know, she whispered. He looked at her, not at her clothes, not at her shoes, but into her eyes. I've wanted to say this in person for a long time. Thank you, Mira swallowed. It was nothing. It wasn't nothing, he said firmly. You gave my son food when he was lost and afraid. You walked him to safety. You asked for nothing in return. That kind of courage. It's rare. I wasn't being brave, she said. I just did what anyone would do. He smiled faintly. But not everyone would. That's the point, he paused, then added. I didn't want to interfere in your life. I was afraid you'd think I was trying to buy your gratitude. So I stayed away. But I needed you to know what you did mattered. It changed us. Mira looked down. I didn't do it for you. I did it because he was just a boy, alone in the rain. And that, he said softly, is why it meant so much. They stood in silence for a moment. Around them, the school buzzed with noise, laughter, footsteps, the hum of fluorescent lights. But in that corner, it felt still. Will you accept the scholarship? He asked gently. I already did, she said. Good, he said. Not because of me, but because you deserve it. Then, before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He didn't hand it to her, just placed it on a nearby bench. In there is a letter, he said, from Arjun, and a note from me, no money. No promises, just thank you. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. If you ever need anything, not money, not favors, just help, there's a number in that letter. Call it. Anytime. Then he walked away, blending back into the crowd like any other visitor. Mira waited until he was gone before picking up the envelope. Inside, Arjun had drawn a picture. 2 stick figures under an umbrella, one holding out a small packet. Beneath it, he'd written, You saved me. Now I want to be like you. The other note was short and neat handwriting. Kindness doesn't need a name. But I wanted you to know yours is remembered. V. Mira folded the notes carefully and tucked them into her school bag, next to her math textbook. That evening on the train back to Dharavi, she stared out the window as the city lights flickered past. She thought about the man's eyes, tired but kind. Not the eyes of a billionaire. Just a father, and for the first time she didn't feel like an outsider in that fancy school. She felt like someone who belonged, not because of what she had, but because of who she was. When she got home, her brother ran to her, holding up a drawing of his own. Look, I drew you and the rich boy. Mira laughed, hugging him tight. Her mother watched from the doorway, a quiet smile on her face. No one said anything about the scholarship, the visit, the letter. But that night, as Mira lay on her mat, she didn't feel fear. She felt seen, and sometimes that was the greatest gift of all. Years passed, not in a rush, but in the steady rhythm of small choices adding up to something bigger. Mira didn't become famous overnight. There were no viral videos, no talk show appearances, no dramatic speeches under spotlights. Her story unfolded quietly like a plant pushing through cracked concrete, slow, stubborn, and full of life. She finished school with top marks, not because she was the smartest, though she was sharp, but because she never took a single opportunity for granted. Every textbook, every exam, every quiet hour in the library felt like a gift she'd been handed on a rainy day, and she wasn't about to waste it. She studied social work in college, not business or engineering like many of her classmates. When asked why, she'd simply say, because someone once gave me food when I had nothing. I want to make sure no child has to choose between feeding themselves or helping someone else. Her mother, now healthier thanks to consistent care and a little sewing work from a local cooperative, watched her daughter with quiet pride. She never said much, but sometimes, when Mira came home late from classes, she'd leave a cup of warm milk and a plate of leftover dal on the table. Her way of saying, I see you. I'm proud. Arjun stayed in touch, not with grand gestures, but with consistency. He'd call every few weeks just to check in. Sometimes they'd meet for tea near campus, talking about books, politics, or the absurdity of college exams. He studied economics, but his real passion was community development. I want to build systems that help people before they fall, he told her once. Not just hand out bandages after the wound. They never spoke of the past like it was a debt to be repaid. Instead, they treated it like a seed they'd both been tending, watering it with trust, pruning it with honesty, letting it grow into something neither could have predicted. After graduation, Mira didn't apply for high-paying NGO jobs in air-conditioned offices. She went back to Dharavi, not as a visitor, but as someone who belonged. She rented a small room near her family and started something simple, a lunch program for children who came to the local community school hungry. Just rice, lentils, and vegetables cooked fresh every day, served with a smile. She called it One Plate, One Hope. At first, it was just her and 2 volunteers cooking on a single stove in a borrowed kitchen. They served 20 children a day, but word spread. Mothers brought extra onions. A retired teacher helped with homework after meals. A local tailor mended uniforms for kids who couldn't afford new ones. Then quietly, support began to grow. A donation arrived, enough to buy a second stove. Then a fridge. Then a small shed to serve as a proper kitchen. No name was attached to the donations, but Mira knew. She didn't ask. She just kept cooking. One afternoon, as she stirred a giant pot of dal, Arjun showed up unannounced, sleeves rolled up, holding a box of stainless steel plates. "Thought you could use these," he said. She laughed. "You're supposed to be interning at your father's company." "I am," he said, grinning. "This is my side project." He stayed all afternoon washing dishes, playing games with the kids, listening to their stories. One little girl, no older than 6, tugged his sleeve and whispered, "Are you the boy who got lost in the rain?" Arjun looked surprised. "How do you know that?" "My sister told me," the girl said. "She says a kind girl saved you, and now you're helping us." He looked at Mira, eyes glistening. "I guess the story didn't stay hidden after all." Mira smiled. Kindness never really does. As the program grew, so did its reach. Within 2 years, One Plate, One Hope, was feeding over 200 children daily and offering after-school tutoring, basic healthcare checkups, and even a small library made from donated books. Mira hired local women as cooks and teachers, giving them steady income and dignity. She didn't call it charity. She called it community care. Still, she avoided the spotlight. She turned down interviews, said no to documentary offers. "This isn't about me," she'd tell reporters who came knocking. "It's about the kids, about making sure no child feels invisible." But the world has a way of noticing quiet goodness. One day, a journalist, a woman who'd grown up in a similar settlement, wrote a long feature about the lunch program. She didn't focus on Mira's past. She focused on the present, the laughter in the courtyard, the way children lined up not just for food but for the feeling of being seen. She mentioned, almost in passing, that the founder had once helped a lost boy years ago, never knowing he was the son of one of the country's wealthiest men. The article went viral. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know the Poha girl. News channels replayed old footage of the missing boy case. Social media filled with messages of admiration. Donations poured in, not just money but books, clothes, volunteers. Mira was overwhelmed. For weeks she barely slept. Fielding calls, managing the sudden influx, making sure the heart of the program didn't get lost in the noise. Then one evening, as she sat exhausted on the steps of the community center, Arjun sat beside her. "You okay?" he asked. She sighed. I didn't want this to become a story. I wanted it to be real." "It is real," he said. "The attention is just noise. The work, the kids eating, learning, smiling, that's real. And that hasn't changed." She looked at him. "Do you ever regret that day? Being lost, I mean?" He thought for a moment. "No, because it led me to you. And you showed me that the most powerful thing in the world isn't money or power. It's choosing to care when it costs you something." A few months later, Arjun made an announcement that surprised even his father. He was leaving the family business not to abandon it, but to launch a new initiative, a foundation focused on child nutrition and education in urban slums. And he wanted Mira to co-lead it. They called it the Ripple Project. The idea was simple. One act of kindness creates ripples. Feed one child and they can focus in school. Educate one child and they lift their family. Empower one community and the whole city changes. Mira agreed, but only on one condition. No branding. No billboards with our faces. Just results, Arjun nodded. Deal. Together they expanded the model. They trained local women as nutrition educators, partnered with schools to integrate meals into the day, worked with doctors to provide basic health screenings, and always they listened to the communities they served, never assuming, always asking. Vikram, now older and quieter, watched from the sidelines. He rarely visited, but he funded the foundation's early years without fanfare. Once he sent Mira a letter. "You didn't just save my son. You reminded me what it means to be human. Thank you for letting us walk beside you." Mira kept the letter in her desk drawer, next to the faded newspaper packet she'd once used to wrap poha. Years later, on a warm afternoon, much like the one from that rainy day long ago, Mira stood in the courtyard of a new community center, one of 5 now running across the city. Children played, teachers laughed, the smell of freshly cooked food filled the air. A reporter approached, microphone in hand. People call you a hero. How does that feel? Mira shook her head. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who saw a child in need and did what I could. That's not special. That's human. But your story inspired so many, the reporter pressed. Then let them be inspired to help the person in front of them, Mira said gently, not to wait for a billionaire's son to get lost. Kindness isn't about who you help. It's about helping without knowing who they are. Later that day, as she walked home, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Arjun. New center in Chennai starts next month. You in? She smiled and typed back, always. That night, she sat with her mother and brother on their rooftop, watching the city lights twinkle like stars. Her brother, now a teenager studying engineering, teased her about being famous. I'm not famous, she said, sipping her tea. I'm just doing what's right. Her mother reached over and squeezed her hand. Sometimes that's the most famous thing of all. And in that moment, Mira knew. She hadn't changed the world in a single grand gesture. But she'd changed her corner of it. One plate, one child, one rainy day at a time, and that was more than enough.